She arrived to claim Earth then. Realized the human commander was her. Past. The first thing I saw when the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel was Earth. It hung in the dark like a blue jewel, completely unaware of what was coming. For it, 17 warships surrounded it in a loose formation, and I stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, the Verk, sovereign, watching the planet through the forward screen with cold focus. My name is Commander Lyra Solon of the Verk hegemony, and I had come to take this world. No speeches, no warnings broadcast to the surface. We had been watching this system for 4 years. We knew exactly what humanity had. We knew their satellite networks, their ground-based defense grids, their orbital platforms. We had mapped every military installation on the planet and every armed vessel in their small fleet. By every calculation our strategists had run, this should be over in 6 hours. Fleet is in formation, said Lieutenant Vorin from the navigation console. All ships confirm ready status. Signal the cruisers to hold position. I said, we begin with the orbital platforms. The orbital defense platforms were the first problem. Humanity had built 12 of them, each carrying long-range rail cannons and missile batteries. They were positioned in a geosynchronous ring, evenly spaced, designed to cover every approach vector. Our intelligence suggested they could fire simultaneously and create overlapping fields of fire. That would make a direct approach costly, not impossible, but costly. I was not interested in costly. Target the eastern 3 platforms. First, I said, use the long-range disruptors. Disable, do not destroy. We will need those platforms intact. Our disruptors were designed to scramble electronic systems without causing physical damage. Against human technology, they should work in under a minute. We were not here to obliterate Earth, we were here to claim it. There is a difference. A burned planet is worthless. A conquered planet with its people still alive and its infrastructure standing is an asset. I watched as the energy readings on the tactical screen began to climb. Then something unexpected happened. The orbital platforms moved. Not just their targeting arrays. The entire structure shifted, their positions changing, the neat geosynchronous ring breaking apart and reforming into something else. I had seen this pattern before in old Verac tactical documents. It was a defensive maneuver called the scatter web. You break your platforms out of their predictable formation and let them drift into random position so that any targeting solution becomes outdated the moment it is calculated. Humans were not supposed to know that maneuver. They are repositioning, Vorin said, his voice tight. I see it, I said. Hold fire. The platforms continued to move, but they were not just scattering randomly. I watched the screen and felt something I had not felt in a long time, something close to unease. The platforms were not scattering, they were grouping. They were pulling together into 2 tight clusters positioned at angles that gave them overlapping coverage of our approach vector without giving us clean shots at either cluster from a single position. To hit both clusters, we would have to split our formation, and a split formation opening fire from 2 directions would cause us to cross our own lines of fire. They had just neutralized our opening strategy in about 90 seconds. Who taught them that? Said Vorin quietly. I did not answer. I was already running new calculations. Bring the fleet to a full stop, I said all ships hold position. There was a pause. On a Varak ship, a commander does not hold position. Commander advances. Vorin turned to look at me, but he was professional enough not to question the order out loud. He relayed it. I moved to the long-range communication console and pulled up the frequency we had been given in our mission briefing. Every officer in the Varak hegemony who led a conquest mission was given a standard contact frequency for the target world. It was procedure to contact the governing authority of the planet and offer them a chance to surrender before the fighting began. Most of the time, it was a formality. No one ever actually surrendered. But we made the offer, and we recorded that we made the offer, and the records showed that we gave them a choice. I opened the channel. This is Commander Lyra Solon of the Varak Hegemony Fleet, transmitting on open frequency to all military and government channels of Earth. We have entered your system with overwhelming force. Your orbital defenses have been assessed, and we are prepared to neutralize them at the time of our choosing. We are extending the standard offer of formal surrender before engagement begins. If your designated military commander wishes to speak, respond on this frequency. I expected silence. I expected them to scramble their fighters and start loading their rail cannons. What I got was an immediate response. Commander Solon, this is Colonel Nathan Voss, Earth Combined Defense Command. I have been waiting for your call. The voice stopped me completely. Not because of what he said, because of who he was. I had not heard that voice in 11 years, but I knew it without a single moment of doubt. I had heard it in the dark of a small room on a research station at the edge of very controlled space years ago, when neither of us had any rank at all. I had heard it laugh. I had heard it explain patiently the structural mechanics of a Verk disruptor, array to a curious human who had no business knowing those things, while I sat across from him, pretending I was not teaching him, because officially we were not supposed to be talking at all. Nathan Voss. I stood very still for a moment. My hand was resting on the edge of the console, and I kept it there, pressing down slightly just to feel something solid. Colonel Voss, I said, and my voice came out completely level, which surprised me. I did not expect Earth to have organized a response commander before we arrived. Did you expect us not to know you were coming? He said. You have been watching us for 4 years, Commander. We noticed you watching us about 3 years ago. I said nothing. The platform maneuver was not for your benefit, he continued, and I could hear something in his voice that I recognized, a kind of careful, controlled warmth. He had always been precise with his words, even when he was being informal. That was already the plan, but I admit, it is good to have confirmation that it surprised you. It did not surprise me, I said. You stopped the fleet. The bridge was very quiet. I was aware of every officer behind me listening to this conversation. I was also aware that I was having this conversation at all, which was not standard procedure. Standard procedure was to make the offer, receive the refusal, and begin the engagement. Colonel Voss, I said carefully, the offer of surrender stands. It is genuine. If your government surrenders formally, the hegemony will guarantee the safety of your population and the preservation of your essential infrastructure. You know what the hegemony's record is. On this, conquered worlds are administered, not destroyed. I know what the record says, he replied. I have also read the parts of the record that were not intended for public distribution. The administration gets harder in the first generation. Rights compress, resources redirect. People survive, but they do not thrive. I have studied hegemony governance extensively. Lyra. The use of my given name was quiet and deliberate. The officer at the adjacent console glanced at me very briefly. I did not look back. That is Commander Solon, I said. Of course, said Nathan. My apologies. Commander Solon, my answer is no. Earth does not surrender, but I would like to propose something else. I waited. I would like to meet, he said, in person, neutral ground, you and me, no weapons, no escort beyond one officer each. I have a proposal that I think is worth hearing before anyone fires anything. Every tactical instinct I had said this was a delay tactic. He wanted time for something, reinforcements perhaps, though I could not imagine where reinforcements would come from. Earth had no allies capable of reaching this system quickly. Additional preparation on the surface, more likely repositioning of ground assets, activating secondary defense systems. I should have said no. I will consider it, I said. Stand by. I closed the channel. Voren was looking at me, so were 3 other bridge officers. He is stalling, said Voren. Almost certainly, I said. Your orders, Commander. I looked at the screen. Earth hung there, blue and unaware. The orbital platforms were holding their new positions, 2 tight clusters, patient. 11 years. I thought about the day I had last seen Nathan Voss. It had not been a clean ending. Nothing about our time together had been clean, because nothing about it was supposed to exist in the first place. He was a human researcher on a joint science station that operated in a gray zone of Vark-human relations, officially neutral, practically a place where 2 civilizations exchanged cautious, formal knowledge. We were not supposed to form personal connections. We were both young enough and foolish enough to do it anyway. When the station closed, when the political situation shifted and the joint program was suspended, we went our separate ways. I went back to the hegemony. He went back to Earth. I had assumed he became a researcher. He had apparently become a soldier. And he had apparently spent 11 years studying how to stop me. Prepare a shuttle, I said. I am going to meet him. Voren opened his mouth. That is an order, Lieutenant, I said. He closed his mouth and turned back to his console. I walked to the back of the bridge and stood for a moment looking at nothing. Then I straightened my uniform, walked to the turbo lift, and went to prepare for a meeting I had not expected to have. At the edge of a war I was no longer certain I wanted to start. The shuttle bay of a Verk warship is not a comfortable place. It is all metal and compressed air and the smell of fuel compounds, and the single shuttle I was taking was built for function, not for dignity. I sat in the rear compartment with Lieutenant Voren beside me, which I had insisted upon because if I was walking into something, I wanted someone I trusted to see what happened. Voren had served under me for 3 years. He was methodical, observant, and he almost never spoke unless he had something worth saying. Right now he was sitting with his hands resting on his knees and his eyes on the forward screen, watching the feed from the external cameras as the shuttle moved away from the Sovereign and toward the coordinates Nathan had transmitted. The meeting point was a small commercial docking platform, one of several that orbited Earth at a higher altitude than the defense platforms. It had been built for civilian cargo traffic. It was unarmed and unshielded, and the life support readings we were getting showed only 2 human biosigns aboard. I had taken a risk agreeing to this. I knew it, and I was doing it anyway. The fleet is holding position, Voren said, checking his device. Admiral Kess has been informed that you are conducting a pre-engagement dialogue. He has noted his objection. The log. He can note whatever he likes, I said. He also noted that if you are not back within 2 hours, he will begin the engagement without you. That is his right, I said. It is also why we are not going to take 2 hours. Voren looked at me briefly. He had that expression he sometimes wore when he had a question he had decided not to ask. I appreciated that about him. The docking platform grew larger on the screen. It was a modest structure, circular with a central hub and 4 extending arms. The human shuttle was already docked at one of the arms. It was a small craft, military design but unmarked, which matched the terms we had agreed on. We docked. I stood, checked that I had no weapons, which was the agreement, and walked to the hatch. If this is a trap, Voren said quietly, I want you to know I think it is an exceptionally good one. It is not a trap, I said. How do you know? Because he told me it was not. Voren processed this, and you believe him? It was not quite a question. I believe that Nathan Vast does not lie to people he once cared about, I said. He simply does not do it. He would find another way to handle a situation before he would use deception against someone he had a personal connection with. It is one of his more inconvenient qualities. You know him well, Voren said. I knew him, I said. 11 years ago. He may have changed. Has he? I thought about the way he had said my name on the channel. Quiet, careful, and completely without apology. No, I said. I opened the hatch and walked through. The interior of the docking platform was plain, pale walls, long lights, the faint hum of recycled air. There was a corridor leading to the central hub, and I walked it slowly, aware of every sound, every slight shift in the air. Voren was 2 steps behind me. The central hub was a round room with a table in the middle, 4 chairs, and a wide observation window that looked out at Earth below. The planet was enormous from here, filling most of the window, and I stopped for just a moment when I saw it. I had seen many worlds. I had seen gas giants and ice worlds and rocky dead planets and lush alien biospheres, but I had never seen Earth except on screens. And there was something about it in person that was different. Something about the light on the blue water and the white cloud patterns that made it feel very alive. Nathan was standing by the window. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I had remembered him smaller, because of how we had been back then. Both of us young and uncertain. He was in a military uniform, dark green, with no insignia beyond his rank pin. And he had turned when he heard us enter. His officer was a woman named, I would later learn, Captain Diane Marsh, who stood slightly behind and to his left, with the same careful stillness that Voren carried. Nathan looked at me. I looked at him. 11 years is not always a long time. Sometimes it is just enough time for two people to become exactly what they were always going to be. Commander Solon, he said. Colonel Voss, I said. We crossed the room and sat down across from each other at the table, and outside the window, Earth waited. He put both hands flat on the table, which I recognized. It was a gesture he used when he was about to say something he had thought through very carefully and wanted to deliver without any room for misunderstanding. I am not going to ask you to leave, he said. I know you cannot do that. You have orders. You have a fleet that expects a conquest. You have a hegemony behind you that has already allocated this system in its expansion records. I understand the position you are in. Then what are you asking? I said. I am asking you to listen to something before the shooting starts, he said. Because once it starts, even if you win, which I am not conceding, neither of us gets to take back what happens. You said you had a proposal. I do, he said, but it requires context. First, may I give you the context? I looked at him for a moment. His face was the same and different, older, steadier, something behind his eyes that had not been there before, something that had learned things the hard way. You have until I finish this cup of whatever your officer was kind enough to prepare, I said, nodding toward the two cups that had been placed on the table. One was already in front of me. I had not touched it. It smelled like something warm and slightly bitter. Nathan almost smiled, not quite. It is coffee, he said. You drank it once and said it tasted like engine residue. I have refined my standards since then. I said, have you, he said, and this time the almost smile was a little more. I picked up the cup. He began to talk. What he said over the next 20 minutes reordered several things I thought I knew. He did not argue that humanity was worth saving because it was noble or advanced or peaceful because none of those things were universally true. He argued something much simpler and much harder to dismiss. He showed me data, 11 years of collected information about every planet the hegemony had absorbed. In the last century, population, outcomes, economic trajectories, cultural survival rates. He did not call it anything dramatic. He just laid it out in plain numbers and asked me to tell him what I saw. What I saw was a pattern that the hegemony's official records did not discuss. Conquered worlds recovered technically. The numbers showed recovery, but the numbers for self-determination, for innovation, for the rate at which those populations generated new ideas and new technologies, those numbers declined in the first generation and did not recover for 3 or 4 more. The hegemony gained a planet and a labor resource and a market, but it reliably lost whatever made that world interesting in the first place. Earth is different, Nathan said, not because we are special, because we are young. We have been spacefaring for less than a century. We are at the point where every major leap we are about to make is still ahead of us. If you absorb us now, you will get the planet and the people, but you will not get what we were about to become. You will interrupt the process. The hegemony has absorbed young civilizations before, I said. And how many of them contributed something genuinely new to hegemony, science or culture in the century after absorption? I did not have that number. I do, he said, and he slid a document across the table. The number was very small. We are not arguing for our own safety, Nathan said. We are arguing for your investment, absorb us now at this stage. And you gain a planet, wait, leave us. Protected status, a non-interference. Agreement. Give us 50 years and come back to a civilization that might actually have something worth trading. Something worth being in alliance with, rather than simply owning. I sat with that for a long moment. The coffee was, in fact, better than engine residue. You prepared this argument very carefully, I said. I have had 4 years, he said. And the platform maneuver. I needed you to stop and talk instead of just firing, he said simply. I could not make you negotiate, I could make you think. I set down the cup. Outside the window, Earth filled the sky. I thought about 17 warships waiting behind me and an admiral who had logged his objection and a hegemony that had already written this planet into its expansion records. I thought about the numbers on the document in front of me. I thought about a research station 11 years ago and a young human who asked too many questions and listened to every answer as if it was a gift. I thought about what kind of person I had been then and what kind of person I had become and whether those two things were as different as I had believed. I cannot make this decision alone, I said finally. I know, he said. What I can do is take this data back to my fleet and present it through official channels. I can argue for a delay in the engagement pending a formal review of projected resource outcomes, that is, within my authority as mission commander. It will not guarantee anything. The Admiral has the right to override me. Nathan nodded slowly. But it buys time, he said. It buys time, I agreed. We looked at each other across the table. You became a soldier, I said. You always knew I would, he said. You just thought I meant for a different side. I stood, he stood. We were not going to shake hands. Neither of us moved toward that, but we stood for a moment with the whole weight of what was happening between us and behind us, and I thought that there was something almost extraordinary about the fact that of all the commanders the hegemony could have sent and of all the officers Earth could have placed in charge of its defense, it had come to this. The two of us on a small platform above a blue world trying to find a way through something that every piece of conventional logic said was already decided. You have 2 hours before my admiral moves without me, I said. I know, he said. Go make your argument, Lyra. This time I did not correct him. I turned and walked back through the corridor, and Vorin fell in beside me without a word. When we reached the shuttle and the hatch closed behind us, he sat down and looked at the forward screen. Well, he said, we are going back to the Sovereign, I said. And then I am going to have a very difficult conversation with Admiral Kesu. Will he listen? I thought about the data. I thought about those numbers and what they quietly said about the cost of the hegemony's methodology to the hegemony itself. He is an intelligent man, I said, so probably not immediately, but eventually. Vorin was quiet for a moment. The human, he said carefully. You know him? Yes, I said. How well? I watched Earth growing smaller on the screen as we pulled away from the platform. Well enough, I said, that I am not willing to watch it burn. The shuttle moved through the dark toward the fleet, and behind us the planet turned slowly in the light of its Star, patient and entirely unaware of how close it had just come to the end of everything it had ever built. And I carried a document with a column of very small numbers that was going to make me the most unpopular officer in 17 ships. I did not mind. I had been unpopular before. I had also, a long time ago, sat across a table from someone who asked better questions than anyone I had ever met. And I had learned somewhere in that time that the most important thing a commander can do is not always the most obvious one. The sovereign grew large on the screen. I prepared myself for the hardest argument of my career. And somewhere behind me, on the platform, above the blue world, I was fairly certain Nathan Vass was already preparing for the next one. Admiral Kess was waiting for me. That was my first indication that the next few hours were not going to be easy, because Kess was not a man who waited for people. He was a man who was already in motion before the situation fully developed. And the fact that he had positioned himself in my command chair on my bridge when I walked back through the turbolift doors was a deliberate message. He stood when I entered, which was protocol, and then he stayed standing, which was also a message. Kess was older than me by about 20 years, and he wore that age in the particular way that Verk military culture produced in its senior officers. Sharp, contained, with a kind of permanent patience that was not actually patience, but rather the confidence of someone who had never been seriously contradicted. He had conducted 11 conquest missions. All 11 had been successful. He had no reason to expect number 12 to be any different. Commander Solon, he said, your report. The human commander offered a strategic proposal, I said, moving to the tactical table in the center of the bridge. I placed the data document Nathan had given me on the surface and activated the display. I have brought it back for formal review as required by protocol. Protocol also requires that pre-engagement dialogue not exceed 40 minutes. Cass said, you were gone for 1 hour and 17 minutes. The dialogue had value, I said. I made judgment call. Cass looked at the data display. He did not move toward it. The standard offer was extended and refused, he said. It was extended. The human commander's response was conditional, not a direct refusal. He requested time to present an alternative framework. An alternative to surrender, said Cass. An alternative to immediate conquest, I said. Yes. A few of the bridge officers were very carefully not looking at either of us. Cass finally walked to the tactical table and looked at the data. He studied it for about 30 seconds. I watched his face. Nothing moved in it. This is human-generated data, he said. Compiled from hegemony public records, I said. He used our own numbers. Our own numbers, filtered and selectively arranged to support a conclusion. I reviewed the methodology, I said. Selection criteria are documented. I can find no evidence of manipulation. The pattern holds even when you adjust for the variables he excluded. You ran an independent analysis. In the shuttle, yes. Cass looked at me for a moment that was just slightly longer than necessary. You came back from that meeting with a head full of human arguments, and you have spent the last hour building a case for them. I came back from that meeting with data that has direct implications for the projected return value of this mission. I said. That is within my responsibility as mission commander to assess and report. And your assessment is what exactly? I had thought about exactly how to say this on the shuttle, and I had decided that the only approach with Kess was complete directness. He did not respect hedging, he did not respect uncertainty, but he did in his way respect an officer who stated a position and stood in it. My assessment is that the long-term resource extraction value of an immediately conquered Earth is lower than the hegemony's mission projections indicate, I said. Specifically, the projections do not account for post-absorption innovation decline, which our records show occurs consistently in young civilizations, and which reduces the economic productivity of the absorbed population by approximately 22% over the first 50 standard years. Cass said nothing. The human commander is proposing a protected status agreement, I said. Non-interference, no military presence. Open channel monitoring, in exchange. Trade access in a formal alliance. Framework to be negotiated over a 50-year period. At the end of 50 years, the status is reviewed. That is not conquest, Kess said. No, I said, it is something that may be worth more than conquest. Kess turned away from the table and looked at the forward screen. Earth was still there, still patient. The orbital platforms were still in their double cluster formation. The Hegemony Council approved this mission, he said. The expansion records have already allocated this system. The Council approves missions based on projected value, I said. If the projected value is inaccurate, they have approved a mission based on flawed data. The data I now have suggests the projections are flawed. Protocol provides that I formally submit this to the record and request a review before engagement. A review takes time. Yes, I said it does. Kess turned back to face me. I had known this moment was coming from the moment I walked back on the shuttle. I had known it, and I had prepared for it, and I was still not entirely ready for the weight of it, because what I was doing was not just presenting data. I was standing between a fleet and a planet, and I was doing it because a man I had not seen in 11 years had sat across a table from me and trusted me with numbers instead of weapons. You like this world, Kess said quietly. I like accurate calculations, I said. That is not what I said. I held his gaze. Admiral, I said, I am formally requesting on the record that engagement be delayed pending a review of mission value projections. I am citing Section 14 of the Hegemony Conquest Protocol, which provides for exactly this situation. You can override me, that is. You're right, but the request goes in the record and the data goes in the record. And if this mission proceeds without a review and the projections prove inaccurate, that is also in the record. Section 14 was not often invoked. It was considered in most military circles procedural formality that no one actually used. Using it was not a career-ending move technically, but it was the kind of move that people remembered. Kess knew that I knew that. He also knew that the data was real. How long, he said, does the human commander need to prepare a formal proposal document suitable for submission to the Hegemony Council? I tried not to let anything show on my face. I can ask him, I said. Do that, said Cass. He picked up the data document and looked at it once more. Something shifted very slightly in his expression, something I could not Quite read. 22%, he said quietly as if to himself. Yes, I said. I reviewed the Kelloran mission 3 years ago, he said. The projections were off by 19%. We attributed it to local political instability. I know, I said. He looked at me. You flagged it at the time. I was a lieutenant commander, I said. My flag was noted and filed. Yes, he said, it was. He set the document down. 48 hours, Commander. That is what I can give you within my authority before I am required to report to the Council directly if the human commander can produce a formal proposal within 48 hours that I find credible enough to transmit to the Council. I will transmit it. What happens after? That is beyond both of us. Understood, I said. This does not mean I am convinced, he said. It means I am an officer who reads data. He moved toward the exit of the bridge. At the door he stopped. Contact your human colonel. Tell him he has 47 hours. I am keeping 1 hour for travel time and drafting. He left. The bridge was very quiet. Vorin appeared at my side. Section 14, he said softly. Yes, I said. No one uses Section 14. Someone should, I said. I went back to the communication console and opened the channel. Colonel Voss. Nathan answered in under 2 seconds, which told me he had been waiting. Commander Solon, you have 47 hours to produce a formal proposal document suitable for submission to the Hegemony Council. I said it needs to meet their specific format requirements, which I will transmit to you in the next 10 minutes. It needs to include your complete data, set full methodology, and a detailed outline of the proposed protected status. Terms. There was a brief silence. You got him to agree, Nathan said. I got him to consider, I said. That is not the same thing. Do not mistake this for a victory. It is a delay. I know, he said, but delays are how things change. A pause. Thank you, Lyra. Do not thank me yet, I said. Write the proposal, make it perfect. You have one chance. I know how to make one chance count, he said. I believed him. I transmitted the Council's format requirements and then stood at the console for a moment, looking at the screen, watching Earth turn slowly below the fleet. 47 hours. Somewhere down there, Nathan Voss was about to spend 47 hours writing the most important document of both our lives. And somewhere above him, on a warship that had come to end everything he had built, I was going to spend those same 47 hours making sure that when he finished, someone would actually read it. It was not the war anyone had planned. But some things are worth more than a quick victory. I went to my quarters, sat at my desk, and opened the mission records. I had a case to build. 47 hours is not very long. I know that in ordinary life, 2 days can feel slow, can feel like time stretching comfortably from one end of a week to another. But on a warship holding position above a planet it has been sent to conquer, with 16 other ships in formation and an admiral in a race against his own orders, 47 hours is a heartbeat. I spent most of them at my desk. Nathan transmitted sections of the proposal as he completed them, and I reviewed each one in detail before sending back notes, not suggestions. Exactly, more like pressure tests. I would find every weakness in the argument, every place where the logic could be attacked by a council member. who had already decided on conquest in. I would mark it clearly, then he would revise, then I would review again. It was, I thought, during the third cycle, an extremely strange way to spend the night before a potential war. Vorin came to my quarters sometime around the 18th hour with a report that 2 of the cruiser captains had filed formal inquiries with Admiral Kess regarding the delay. The fleet was getting restless. The crews had been on combat readiness for 4 days during the approach, and the psychological weight of holding position without action was doing what it always does to soldiers: it makes them edgy. Kess responded, I asked. He cited Section 14 and told them to stand by. Vorin said he did not explain further. Good. Vorin sat down across from me, which was unusual. He was not a man who sat without invitation, but I had not told him to stand, and the look on his face said he had something to say that was not a report. Commander, he said carefully, I have served with you for 3 years. I know, I said. In 3 years I have watched you make 11 significant tactical decisions. I have agreed with 10 of them completely, and the 11th I agreed with after about 20 minutes of consideration. I trust your judgment more than I trust anyone else in this fleet. I sense there is a qualification coming, I said. I want to understand what is happening, he said, not because I doubt you, because I want to be able to support you correctly, and right now I'm not sure I fully understand the situation. I sat back in my chair. It was a fair thing to ask. It was, in fact, exactly the kind of thing a good officer should ask, and Vorlag was a very good officer. When I was younger, I said, I served on a joint research station on the border of hegemony and human-controlled space. It was an academic exchange program, officially science and engineering research shared between 2 civilizations trying to determine whether cooperation was viable. I was there as a structural engineering specialist. Nathan Vass was there as a physics researcher. I paused. We worked together for about 14 months. Vorlag said nothing. He is brilliant, I said, not in an obvious way. He is the kind of brilliant that looks like stubbornness from the outside, because he refuses to accept conclusions until he has tested every assumption. He would argue with the station's senior researchers when he thought they had jumped to an answer too quickly, and he was usually right, and they usually resented him for it, and he did not care at all, because being right was more important to him than being liked. I looked at the document on my screen. He has been applying that same methodology to this problem for 4 years. The data he showed me is not propaganda. It is the work of someone who spent 4 years refusing to accept the conclusion that Earth had no options. You trust him, Vorin said. I trust the data, I said, which he built. Those are not entirely different statements in this case. I looked at Vorin. No, I said, they are not. He nodded slowly. And if the council rejects the proposal? I thought about that. It was something I had been not thinking about for most of the past 18 hours, which is its own kind of thinking. Then the fleet engages, I said. And you? I am a commander of the hegemony fleet, I said. If the council orders engagement, I follow that order. My objection will be on record. My data will be on record, and then I will do my duty. Vorin was quiet for a long moment. I hope the council reads carefully, he said. So do I said. He stood and left, and I turned back to the document. At hour 31, Nathan transmitted the final section of the proposal. I read it from beginning to end, which took about 2 hours, and when I finished, I sat back and looked at my ceiling for a while. It was without question the most precisely argued strategic document I had ever read. He had not appealed to emotion, he had not talked about human art or culture or the right to self-determination, though he could have. Instead, he had done something harder. He had made the hegemony's own case against immediate conquest using the hegemony's own values: economic efficiency, resource maximization, long-term strategic positioning. He had found the gap between what the hegemony believed it was doing and what the data showed it was actually achieving, and he had built his argument in that gap. If the council read this with open minds, there was a real possibility it would work. I thought about how many council members read anything with open minds, and I prepared a detailed cover transmission. At hour 38, I submitted the full proposal package to Admiral Kess. At hour 40, Kess transmitted it to the Hegemony Council with his own cover note, which I was not shown, but which, based on what happened next, must have been more supportive than I expected. The next 7 hours were the longest I had experienced in recent memory. The fleet held position, Earth held position. Orbital platforms remained in their double cluster formation, patient and ready. I ate something, though I could not have told you what. I reviewed mission contingency plans, which I did not expect to need, but which I needed to review in order to feel like I was doing something. Vorin brought me another report at hour 44. 2 more captains had filed inquiries. Kess had responded to all of them the same way. At hour 46, the response came from the council. It came to Kess first, then to me, and when I read it 3 times before I moved. It was not an approval. It was not a rejection. It was something I had never seen in a Hegemony Council response to conquest mission. It was a request for extended review with a formal delegation appointed to evaluate the proposal. Full review time estimated at 60 standard days. During the review period, the fleet was ordered to maintain position and refrain from engagement. 60 days. 2 months. I sat with that number and felt something that was not quite relief and not quite victory, and was probably best described as the particular feeling of someone who has pushed a very large stone a very short distance and is aware that there is still a great deal of stone and a great deal of distance remaining, but who has at least proven that the stone can move. I opened the channel. Colonel Voss. I heard, he said. His voice was careful, steady. 60 days. 60 days, I confirmed. A breath. That's not over, he said. No, I said, it is not over. It is the beginning of a very long argument, but the argument is happening instead of the other thing. Yes, he said, quiet. Yes, it is. I looked at the forward screen. Earth, as always, was there. You should know, I said, that even during the review this fleet is not leaving. We are maintaining position. That was a condition of the delay. I know, he said. 17 warships parked above the planet is not exactly a comfortable situation. No, I said, but it is better than the alternative. It is, he said. A silence. Your proposal was well constructed, I said. I had good notes, he said. The notes were pressure tests, they were not arguments. You argued by pointing out where the argument was weak, he said. That is still arguing. I could not dispute that. The council delegation will want to speak with you directly at some point. I said they will send a representative, probably within the first 2 weeks. They will push back hard on the 50-year timeline and on the lack of formal hegemony presence in the system during that period. I know, he said, I have counter arguments. I know you do, I said. Have them ready. Council delegates do not like to wait. I will be ready, he said. Will you be present for those discussions? The question was straightforward. The weight behind it was not. I do not know, I said. That will depend on what Kest decides about fleet command arrangements during the review. Period. It is possible I will be recalled and a senior diplomat will be sent in my place. I hope you stay, he said simply. I did not answer that directly. I will do what is best for the outcome, I said. Yes, he said, and I heard in his voice that he knew that was as much of an answer as I was going to give. So will I. We ended the call. I stood at the console for a moment. Around me the bridge hummed with its usual machinery, and through the forward window the fleet floated in perfect formation, waiting as fleets do for something to happen. What happened next took a long time. The council delegation arrived 19 days later, a ship that docked with the Sovereign before proceeding to Earth orbit for formal discussions. The lead delegate was a woman named Councillor Arden Vesh, who was 63 years old, had administered 4 absorbed worlds, and who read every document placed in front of her with the complete attention of someone who expected to be tested on it. She read Nathan's proposal in full on the first evening and then spent the following morning asking me questions. That told me she had read every footnote. She spoke with Nathan for the first time on day 22 of the review. The conversation lasted 4 hours. I was present for the agreed terms, and I sat to the side and watched 2 extremely precise minds work through the same set of numbers from opposite directions, and occasionally, to the visible surprise of both of them, arrive at the same place. Cass attended 2 of the sessions. He did not speak often. When he did, he asked the kind of short, exact questions that made everyone in the room think more carefully. 60 days became 90 because the council needed more time. 90 became 120. The fleet remained in position. Earth's orbital platforms remained in their double cluster formation, ready, but still there were tense moments. There were 3 incidents in which patrol vessels from both sides came too close to each other in the outer system, and each time the protocols that Nathan and I had drafted during the review period were applied, and the situation was de-escalated before it became something worse. I stayed. Cass made the decision to keep the original mission command structure in place for continuity, and I remained on the Sovereign, and I participated in every session of the review discussions that I was permitted to attend. Nathan and I did not meet in person again during that period. All communication was through official channels, properly logged, properly observed. It was the right way to handle We both knew it and neither of us suggested otherwise. On day 131, the council issued its decision. I read it alone in my quarters early in the morning before the rest of the ship was fully awake. I read it twice, then I sat and looked at the wall for a while. It was not everything Nathan had asked for. It was not a clean, protected status with a 50-year non-interference period and an open trade framework. The hegemony did not operate that way. The hegemony did not give anything away cleanly. But it was something that had not existed before. The council had created a new category, a supervised development status, which was different from a protected status in that it included a formal hegemony, observer presence in the system, a small monitoring station, 2 ships, no weapons on the surface, no military governor, an observer team reporting to the council every 6 months, a formal review at year 25, not year 50, in a trade framework that was narrower than Nathan had proposed, but that was real and binding. It was, in the language of hegemony, governance a compromise. The hegemony did not stop wanting Earth, it simply agreed to want it differently for now, in exchange for being allowed to watch it develop. It was the beginning of something, not the end of something. And that meant it was exactly what Nathan had been arguing for. I opened the channel. It was early by Earth time too, which told me he had also been awake, also waiting. The decision came, I said. I know, he said. We received a simultaneous transmission. And a pause, longer than his usual pauses. It is not what I hoped for, he said. No, I said. But it is not what I was afraid of. No, I said, it is not that either. Another pause. Outside my window the dark was full of stars, and the blue curve of Earth was just visible at the edge of the frame. 25 years, he said. That is the first real review point. Yes. A lot can change in 25 years. It can, I said. The monitoring station, he said. The observer team. It is not a garrison, I said. It is not a military presence. It is observers. It is exactly the kind of thing that was proposed in joint research programs before either of us were officers. He was quiet for a moment. I thought I understood what he was thinking. We were both observers once, he said. We were, I said. It did not end the way anyone expected. No, I said, it did not. He took a breath. Are you going to be one of the observers? The question I had been expecting and not answering to myself for several weeks. I do not know yet, I said. That is a decision that goes above both of us. Cass has submitted a recommendation. I do not know what it says. What would you want? He said quietly. It was the kind of question that only Nathan Vass would ask directly, without architecture, without diplomatic cover. Just the question, plain, waiting for an answer. I looked at the curve of the planet in my window. I thought about 17 warships and a document with a column of very small numbers and 47 hours and a cup of coffee. That tasted like something I had been wrong about for 11 years. I would want to see how it turns out. I said, whatever that means for my position. I heard him exhale. It was a small sound. It carried a lot. Then I hope you get to, he said. We ended the call. The sun was coming up on the edge of the planet, a thin line of gold spreading across the upper atmosphere, and I watched it for a long time. Below that line was everything he had been protecting. Below that line was a civilization at the beginning of whatever it was going to become. In 3 days, I received my new orders. I was assigned as Deputy Commander of the Hegemony Observer Mission, Earth. System, duration, open-ended, subject to the 25-year review. The monitoring station would be constructed in the outer system, neutral ground, with a crew of 42. My primary responsibility was to serve as the liaison between the mission and the Earth Combined Defense Command, which meant my primary contact would be Colonel Nathan Voss. I packed my things with the careful efficiency of someone who had moved between assignments many times and read the orders a second time and then a third. There was a word in the official language of the assignment that I kept returning to. The word was liaison, which in hegemony administrative language means the point of connection between two systems that are not yet fully integrated but are moving towards some kind of relationship. I thought it was a very accurate word. Cass came to see me off when the shuttle came to transfer me to the station construction vessel. He stood at the shuttle bay door and shook my hand, which was not something he did with subordinates generally. I read your flag on the Kelloran mission. Again, he said, the one you filed when you were a lieutenant commander. Yes, I said. You were right, he said, the numbers were wrong on that one too. He let go of my hand. Try not to be right so quietly next time. I smiled. It surprised me slightly. Yes, Admiral, I said. I boarded the shuttle and it carried me away from the Sovereign and out through the fleet. Through the window I watched the warships one by one as I passed them, their heavy shapes against the dark. They were good ships. They had come here to do a job, and in the end they had done a different job, and I did not think that was a smaller thing. I thought it might be a larger one. The station construction site was at a Lagrange point between Earth and its moon. When I arrived, Nathan was waiting on the communication channel. Commander Solon, he said, welcome to your new post. Colonel Voss, I said, I understand. I will be working with you closely. You will, he said. I have a list of items to go over with you, starting with the observation protocols and the communication framework and the incident response procedures. I also have a list, I said. I assumed you would, he said. A pause. How long is yours? Longer than yours, I said. I heard him laugh, a real laugh, not contained, not careful, the same laugh I had heard on a research station 11 years ago when I said something that surprised him. Then we have a lot of work to do, he said. Yes, I said, we do. Outside the window, Earth turned in the light, the whole blue world full of people who would wake up that morning and go about their lives not knowing how close everything had come to changing, not knowing about a table in a platform above them and a document with a column of numbers and 47 hours and 2 people who had once been young and uncertain and were now something else, something that was still being worked out. 25 years to the first review. A lot can change in 25 years. I put my things down in my new quarters, sat at my desk, and opened Nathan's list. It was, as I had expected, a good one. I opened mine beside it, and we began.